Hi everyone, welcome to Art and Talk. Art and Talk is an online interviewing platform for artists to share their art, creativity, and passion. We embrace all the arts, the traditional arts and the spiritual arts, to bring you diverse and quality interviews to watch and be inspired by. We like to bring you a wide variety of artists, and if you're an artist and you're watching this and you'd like to be interviewed on Art and Talk, please send an email to viewoftheartist@gmail.com and we'll get back to you with scheduling and information. We hope you've had a moment to check out some of our artist videos on our YouTube channel, Art and Talk, and also on our Facebook page, and be on the lookout for new ones that are uploaded weekly. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. And again, thank you everyone for watching today. We have a guest artist today that is both a poet and a photographer, and we'll be exploring both of those aspects of that in his artistic journey. Again, thanks for watching, everyone. I'd like to welcome our guest artist for today, Nicholas Marino. Hi, Nicholas. Welcome.
Hi, Leslie. How are you today?
Good, good. So good to reconnect with you. We haven't touched base since you were our guest poet for our Valentine's Day poetry reading. So awesome to see you again.
It's good to see you as well. I enjoyed the poetry read, so I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, me too. All right. So you're gonna share with us an opening poem, and if you're ready, we'd love to hear it.
All right, awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Nicholas. I'm from New Jersey, and I actually wrote this poem on the fly today, a few minutes before this interview. So it's called In a Flash. Click, turn on, open lens, focus, zero in, and press the penny-size black and silver button. Hear the sounds of beep. See your production. Each photo, each digital image tells a story of life, a narrative of strife. Make it your own, whether black and white, sepia, or color tone. Or rather, push and apply pressure. Reduce your stressors. Rattle and shake, then get to spraying. Create art on concrete. Graffiti without boundaries in hiding or on the street. It invokes a spark, lights the eye, makes the critic ask how, what, when, and why. It's all for fun, all for joy. Girl or boy, you can make it your own. Just shoot your shot and make it feel like home.
Mm, that's awesome. You did that on the fly.
Yeah, I try to tie it into what I was going to discuss today, like what we kind of talked about before, and I was thinking about the two things I really enjoy, which is art and photography, and I figured a way of, well, how can I explain that in a poem? Because none of my other poems that I've written in the past ever talked about that. So I took it in a way of how I physically prepare myself as to when I'm taking a photo or the thought process behind doing it and sharing with everybody about that.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that because we get your sense of like, in the moment and your thought process, and then actually, we kind of feel like the actual movement and the actual experience of being behind the lens and shooting as you were, being descriptive in your poem as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add a piece of that. I wasn't really sure how to add the sound, but like recently over the holiday, I finally got like a nice camera, and so I'm used to just shooting with my cell phone or something basic like a Polaroid. And so with this camera, when you press the button, it like lasers in, and I was trying to figure out how to mimic that sounds, but that's how it sounds to me. So
Hmm. Yeah. Well, those sounds are important. Those are all part of like the photographic experience when you're actually shooting.
yeah, that's correct. And it really is an experience, you know. For me, every single picture I take tells some type of story or some type of thought that I was going through in the process. And even if I'm not experiencing it, I want to provide the person who's viewing it with what I'm experiencing at the time. You know?
Mhm. There were two aspects of your poem. Before we get into your photography, Nicholas, I'd just like for you to touch upon, if you would please. One is the aspect of concrete. You were saying to shoot on concrete. What is the meaning behind that concrete? Like, what does that mean for you, or what are you aiming to convey?
Sure. So in the line where it said creating art on concrete, it's me doing graffiti art. Part of my, I guess, side hobby, so to say, is doing graffiti art or murals to invoke thought and inspire the communities. I do have a spot that I go to in an industrial town here in New Jersey, and it's under, I guess you can say, it's used to be an old railway, and now it's like I guess a rail trail, so to say, unofficially. And so when I create most of my art, it's on concrete, on brick wall, or some form of concrete. So
Mhm.
uh, that's what I alluded to in that line.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, great, great. And that relates to some of the images that we're going to be looking at as well. And then at the end, Nicholas, you said about home. So I thought that was really beautiful. And it's that, tying into like just these passions, these creative fields that you're in. It feels like home, or did you have a completely different take on it?
No, so I guess like in the end, just shoot your shot, make it feel like home is whatever that you enjoy doing in life, you just go for it and make it what you like of it, and even better than what it's supposed to be, because art doesn't, for me, art doesn't have any boundaries. It doesn't really have any rules. If you deal with graffiti, it has some rules that you have to follow, but generally in art, it could be anything, unless you're doing a commission piece for somebody and they want a specific way. But um, whatever you're doing in life, you want to make it as comfortable as can be, that you push the boundary a little bit, you push the status quo a little bit, and ultimately you make yourself happy. And for me, home is a happy place. So doing art, doing photography, writing poetry, that all is home for me, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautifully said. I love that whole sense of feeling at home. And I like how you incorporated the sense of joy, and also kind of giving that freedom away, so to speak. Like, whatever your joy is, may not be, photography or poetry, or it could be, is just like, hey, just go out there and experience your joy. And I love that, with no boundaries, and just that whole sense of like freedom is really awesome.
And if I could touch on, because you made a really good point saying freedom, we as writers have freedom that we don't get as citizens in this world. Coming into this country, we're land of the free, home of the brave, but we don't really get freedom. We're boxed in and we're, controlled to go, but, pick different groups and go certain ways. But as writers, we have the ability to be free, kind of goes off of that movie, Freedom Writers. Um, so writing and art gives you the freedom to express yourself really without judgment.
Hmm.
This is a community, like, especially I always say with poetry, I have a small group of friends that we share with, and I feel like that community understands itself. If you tell somebody who's not a poet about your poem, they'll be like, oh, that's good, it sounds good. But if you speak to somebody else who writes, it's just a different conversation. You know?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like you kind of like have that moment of like linking up, and you just kind of like you're on that same wavelength.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Um, Before we get into your photography, the overlap of the arts, like often we find that, if someone is a visual artist, they may also be a musician, or they may overlap into different areas of the visual arts, and then like incorporating poetry and writing. Can you just touch upon for us, Nicholas, poetry and photography? What is the interconnection that you feel about it? I mean, we kind of know the obvious differences, but what kind of overlaps them in your perspective?
That's really a great question. Never really thought about that. I know like recently what I've been doing, and it's probably partly inspired by one of my friends who's a poet in New York. He's been taking pictures and putting poems over that, and then expressing what he feels from that picture. Sometimes it's nothing even related to the picture; it's just what he feels inside. Um, Usually, when I post something, I write a little blob of how I'm feeling at the bottom. And as of recently, where I live in New Jersey, we've had really nice sunsets lately, and it's been really, really inspiring to me. So I may write something that's, I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but um, you know, I guess the photograph per se um, gives off a feeling, and off of that feeling comes into the poetry. So different So let's say, for example, the sky is really bright and vibrant. You know, may give off depends on the color, may give off a certain intensity or certain emotion, and that may turn into some poem or writing of some sort, or not. You know, but I guess that's the great thing about the freedom of both of those things in tandem.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Before we look at the photography, can you kind of set this up for us and just give us a little sneak peek about like what are we going to be looking at?
Yeah, so unbeknownst to many of the folks probably on this channel, a lot of the photography is going to be based upon graffiti mostly, and my experience with different artists. So each of the shots that you're going to be looking at kind of has a story behind it. Really started off as a teenager, so to say. In my area, there was a factory in the park, and my parents never knew that I would ride my bike to this factory, and I would spend all day there watching the artists paint. And I would listen to their stories, listen to their process behind what they were executing, and then I would take the final product of their piece, so to say. But as I grew older, I wanted to understand the process. I wanted to understand how they went from the sketch, or even before the sketch, how they even thought about what they were going to put on that wall. And then moving it from paper to wall or whatever it is, you know. So that's what you'll be seeing in the photos that'll be coming up.
So basically, Nicholas, you just kind of spontaneously kind of ended up in this world of graffiti art. You're on your bike and you're pretty young, and you just somehow kind of like lock into this world. You become fascinated with it, and you become really observant of the artist, and you really want to get into the creative process and like all the different stages. And this just really attracted you.
It did. It got my attention because a lot of the artists were futuristic and forward thinking. A lot of the things that they talk about, I never even talked about with any adults, like in my normal life. You know, even professionals, people with doctoral degrees, and I myself had my master's degree, but even with people at higher level of education, I've never had those deep, evocative um, conversations. You know, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations too, but it provokes thought and really thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, and what's the cause at the end of the day. Because I feel for me, like graffiti is often looked upon as negative. People perceive graffiti to be vandalism and such an ugly thing, but graffiti takes all shapes and forms. And luckily over the years, a lot of graffiti artists, unbeknownst to most society, have been commissioned for murals all over big metropolitan cities and even some urban environments, So graffiti may have a negative connotation and a negative like stigma similar to mental illness. Um, but it really has a great message behind it.
hmm Yeah, I love the light that you're bringing to graffiti art. If you're ready, we can go ahead and pull up the first image and we'll have you share with us and elaborate.
Awesome. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, very good. Give me just a moment and I'm going to pull it up. Okay.
All right. So this photo is So most of the photos are in abandoned buildings. This one was an abandoned building. I don't give locations away, so sorry about that. But this one was a variety of old rustic cans. And I found it to be intriguing because they're all like placed as if somebody just placed them up there. And I don't know if they placed it there with a purpose, but I found it to be intriguing to take this shot because it had shown me that as time had passed, as you look at some of the different cans, there's different brands. Some of the older brands are like Krylon, Rust-Oleum, and then some of the newer brands are like Montana and Iron Lac. So just me knowing my knowledge throughout the time, I can see the process of how long those cans have been there and just the decay in it, you know?
Mhm. Right, right. And I can see it relating to the graffiti art, and it really sets the stage well, to kind of give us the materials that the that the graffiti artists use to actually, create the graffiti itself. We see the spray cans and the paint buckets above.
Yeah, and then you also at the bottom, I don't know if you can see in yellow spray is written the word clout.
Yes.
That's actually a crew. There's a crew here in New Jersey called Club Clout, so to say, if you ever see the tag on their pieces. And for me, I mean, clout means many things, but for me, clout is feeling like euphoric, feeling high. And I don't necessarily get high off of any of that stuff, but in a metaphorical standpoint, um, you know, taking a picture like this just gives me some type of euphoria to know that um, it's kind of like portraying over the years from decay to modern time. You see rustic paint, but you also see paint that probably wasn't used not too long ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the artists are kind of leaving their mark, so to speak. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it would be fair to say that this building in particular was an old uh, Agent Orange factory that was used during wartime. And it's just been abandoned for years. I mean, probably even before since I was a kid. And now that I'm an adult, I go and explore in there. So a lot
Mm,
of times when I go in these buildings, I just stop and there's no machinery really left in this building, but I just stop and kind of think about what it used to be like when the factory was working, and now it's pretty decrepit and pretty terrible looking. But the graffiti art brings the building to life. You
hmm.
know?
Yeah. All right. If you're ready, let's go ahead and go to the next image.
Sure.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So this one was of importance. Typically, if I ever see an artist sketch, um, before you ever take a picture, just for anybody, if you see a graffiti artist painting a wall, make sure you ask permission if you could take pictures of them, because they may be active writers. And, my rule is never show their face, because I will never post their face online, especially if they're active writers, because for a variety of reasons. But this was a wall I was invited to shoot for. There's over 30 artists. And with this particular picture, I asked the artist if I can take the picture. He said, sure. And this name here, Asan, is a name of an artist that had passed away. I believe it was last year or prior to the year before that. And so he was doing a tribute piece to him.
Oh,
So I had the original sketch and I was able to shoot the sketch that was on the wall. So you can see that the sketch on the piece of paper on the wall is like almost perfect, you know?
hmm. Yeah, I love this because we really get an insider view into the graffiti artist, seeing the sketch in the foreground, and then in the background, seeing the outlines, and then what you've just shared kind of brings it to life even more. So Nicholas, you said this was a group of 30 artists that were actually creating the art on this particular wall.
Yeah, it's I can give you the location, it's no big deal. It's in Newark, New Jersey, and it was a pretty busy street, downtown Newark. And the artist who actually planned this wall. He runs an art collective down in Newark called Down Arts Collective. And he brings artists from all over, mostly from New Jersey, but he does bring artists internationally. And there's a few international artists on this wall. Um, but like, it was great to meet other writers that I wouldn't typically get the opportunity to shoot or interact with. So it was great to interact with them and really get a sense of who they are as a person and who they are as an artist, you know?
Right, right. Yeah.
So yeah, and this particular painting too, I like to take a picture with the cans that the person is using.
Mhm.
So I took the Rust-Oleum can, I'm sorry. Um, I think one of them is Cobra paint, and the other one I'm not too sure, but I really wanted to capture the essence of the sketch because I know for me as an artist, it's so hard for me to put what's on paper to a wall because I haven't been doing it that long. But for these guys who've been doing it for years, some of them decades, um, it's like, you know, it's like riding a bike. Once you do it over and over, it just becomes easy.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that that's an amazing skill to have because you're working so large scale and you're working on this flat surface and the whole dynamics are completely different, as opposed to being in front of an easel and a canvas or a paper and drawing and whatnot.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Nicholas, before we move to the next one, you're giving us such interesting insight into this whole fascinating world of graffiti artists that you've been able to hang out with and get to know. So the have they ever mentioned to you? I mean, obviously we know this one is a tribute specifically to another graphic artist that has passed on. So this is in honor of that artist. But have they ever mentioned it just in terms of other artistic expressions in the graffiti walls, their their message or what why are they doing this or what is um yeah, like why are they doing this? What is their take on this aesthetic? Is it just purely for that? Is it to make statements? What is it you based on your interactions?
So few do it for business that I've come into connection with. I mean, I'm sure that they would love to be sponsored or love to, be paid for it because a lot of people are super, super talented. I mean, it's just incredible the things that they can do. I mean, some artists can do "You're in My Face" with the reflection of the light and everything like perfect. I mean, it's incredible.
Mhm.
But a lot of people do this as a hobby, and simply do it for pure love and passion. There's a real big culture with graffiti, and that would take a whole bunch of other videos and hours. But just to give everybody a brief little history, I mean, graffiti started back in the 70s, 80s, probably even started earlier, like decades and hundreds of years ago in the caveman eras. You see little writings on walls and little scribes. And so, I mean, that may be pertained as graffiti or whatever you may call it. But with here, a lot of the artists just do it simply for the love. And if so, a lot of these artists are in different crews. So, society may label it as gangs, but they're in organized crews, and a lot of them do things for the community. Like this artist that planned this whole event, I mean, he does a lot for the community that people don't really even realize, unless you really know the person. So it's easy from outside point to say, oh, this graffiti artist is a bad person, but getting to know them on that level as a human being and as an artist really brings to light who they are as people in this world.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's pretty much it about them. I mean,
Yeah.
I love it because um, graffiti art has a message. It's a message to the world, and um, a lot of people don't really know how to express themselves, but they know how to express themselves through other artistic abilities or through activism or whatever it may be. And like for me, I can best express whatever they're talking to me about through a photograph, and I spend countless time with them to try and develop that rapport and relationship with them. Like this particular day, it was so hot. I mean, it was like almost 100 degrees, but everybody came together, brought water, brought food and all that jazz. And it just it made the event really great, and
Yeah.
it brought value to the community.
Right, right. Now, a quick question before we move on to the next one, Nicholas.
Sure.
Um, do How do you know when they're actually going to be there? Like, do they communicate with you, and are there certain days and times, or like, how do you know to go down there and then to actually photograph?
So I pretty much go to specific spots that I know there's graffiti art, but this specific one was planned. So I had reached out to the artist that ran the event, and I didn't really like ask for permission to go because we already have a fairly decent relationship. But I just said, hey, can when's this event going to go down, like what time, because typically there's no real time unless there's a set event and like the city is closing off the street, then you have like a block party or something like that, then there's a specific time. But for this event there wasn't necessarily a specific time, but because it was such a hot day, they try to get there as early as possible. So a lot of it is outreach to the artist, and if the artist is comfortable with you coming out, like for me, like I said, I don't shoot faces because a lot of the artists are active, and I rather give them the you know privacy of not having their face identified unless they wish to be identified on
Mhm.
social media. But you have a lot of police and other, I guess you can say, snitches, so to say. People that don't like the artist may snitch on them if they know they don't do legal work, and try to get them in trouble. And I'm not going to participate in that. So if I do take a picture of the person's face, I will email them the picture just for the purpose of giving them that shot that maybe they wouldn't have got otherwise. But I will never post it on social media unless I have permission to do so.
Right, right. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Yeah, so I really like this one. This particular wall is also in North New Jersey. Um, it's done through a collective as well. It's actually this artist I met when I was a kid, going to the factory and watching other artists. And he wasn't even an artist at the time, and neither was I. But later in life, he ended up getting connected to the city, and he came up with his own art collective. So he does a lot of community work, and in part, he's this wall is actually two factories on each side of the street, and it goes for like, I don't want to say a whole block, but the length of the wall is massively big. Goes for a whole street. The reason I like this picture in particular was the two artists. When they're doing graffiti art, if you're like standing right by the wall and you're doing your piece, it's kind of hard to see the detail of your piece. But when you step back and you look from across the street or whatnot, you can really see everything. You can see the detail. You can see maybe where you need to fill in or do a line or do a shade here and there, fix something up. So I like this image because it was showing a perspective of the artist stepping back, taking a break and looking at the piece and seeing what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, just to give understanding to everybody, is the artist will be on the wall spray painting, and then they'll take a step back every so often just to make sure that if they need to tweak anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. We get a really good feel for this. You know, I'm wondering, Nicholas, if you could answer this question. Let's say someone is starting out as a graffiti artist and like they're accepted into this like graffiti art club, so to speak. Is any of the teaching like passed down like from the elders, so to speak, those that have been doing it for a while, or is it just like you kind of learn as you go? I mean, is there any like kind of protocol with that if you're just kind of getting started, or maybe you've done a little bit?
I think it really all depends on where you live and what environment you're in. If you're in a rural area, 9 times out of 10, you're probably just doing it by yourself and figuring it out. I mean, with the way the world is now with the internet, I mean, you can just Google search graffiti tutorial, and hundreds of videos pop up. Doesn't necessarily mean it's correct, but when I started off like just sketching and drawing, I had no idea what I was doing, and I still have my old sketches, and I'm just like, oh my god, it's terrible, But those are the beginnings. Everybody starts off like pretty terrible. So in graffiti world, when you start off, you're a toy, which means they're like the lowest possible tier. Um, you know, but nowadays with the internet, everybody who tries to get into graffiti labels themselves a writer or artist or muralist or whatever it is. But it takes work, it takes respect, and being respectful to people overall. Like I said, depending on the area where you live, um, you may have like elder old timer, so to say, take you under their wing, if they're willing. I've had the luxury of having like a few artists that were like, oh, whatever your name is, I'll do a sketch for you or something like that. And just because I built that relationship with them since I was a kid, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but I mean, there's rules and regulations to graffiti. I mean, people have gotten killed before. People have been threatened before. If you disrespect somebody, it's a whole thing. So there are, you know, people need to know the history. And if they're gonna go paint a wall like this, for example, is a permission wall. So if anybody walks up to it and paints it, then there's gonna be an issue with it, because this wall is in particularly, I guess, like owned and operated by a business, but the city give permission and the business give permission to paint on it.
Right, right. See. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the next one.
Sure,
Oops, sorry about that.
that's okay.
Okay.
Didn't want to work. Huh? This one I really like, and it just worked itself out really. So this is in Newark, New Jersey as well. Um, so Newark, New Jersey is also known as Brick City. Reason being is there's a lot of projects. There's a lot of tall buildings, very urban environment. So it took the moniker Brick City. And so they had a Brick City Jam where they had artists mostly from Newark, but some artists international, and some artists from throughout the United States.
Hmm.
This particular artist, I have known him since I was a teenager, um, and he's much older than I, but we got acquainted at this old comic shop that was a graffiti and comic shop, and we just got to talking. I would see him at walls and all that jazz. So this guy that's wearing a shirt, he was biking by and he just stopped. And when I saw the back of his shirt, I'm like, I have to take this picture. Like, and even if he was to leave, I would have asked him to come back just so I could get that picture. Um, so I got the artist in action and I got him with this thing, dream it, work it, live it. I mean, not only with art, but the artist is doing what he loves. He may not do that for his job, but he's living it, he's doing it, and he's working on it. So for me too, with this picture, it pretty much was like just in life too. If you, let's say, want to be an entrepreneur, you know, and you do everything that you need to do, educate yourself and market yourself and promote yourself, and then you live it, you're going to be happy. It may not be easy in the beginning, but ultimately, if you really work hard for it, then your dreams can come true.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I love the message that you're giving, and what you just elaborated on, to fulfill your dreams and kind of the way, to get there. And then here we have the graffiti artist in action.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's really nice. I mean, I I myself, always liked art, and I knew like the saying "starving artist" is really true. I mean, if you try to be an artist, if you're not connected, like it's really hard. I mean, you probably will be starving and sacrificing a lot, but I feel like with anything, if you work hard towards it, you can certainly make your dream or, anything else come true,
Hmm. I'm going to stop the screen share and for
Okay,
just a moment. I know we have another image to look at.
sure.
I love all that you're sharing, and you're just really giving us like this whole like world of graffiti artists just coming to life with all your direct experience and your knowledge, and of course your love for it as well. I'm wondering, before we look at the next image, can you give us, through the years of you interacting with these graffiti artists and really getting to know them, and you said you had, early in the beginning of the interview, you had, some great discussions with them. Can you just share with us, whatever you're comfortable with, maybe like some of the conversations that came up so we can kind of, in our minds, just kind of like, feel like we're there. And what are some of the conversations as we, looked at the imagery as well?
Uh, that's a really great question. Well, I would say like I'll take some artists for example. So in the early '90s with graffiti here, especially in Newark and New Jersey, there's a style called organic. It's an organic style. It's almost like metaphysical and hyperrealism, and it looks like creature-like, almost alien-like. And there's very few artists that still do it to this day. And from time to time on social media, I'll just have random conversations. But for the few artists that do it, I always reach out to them and say, I really appreciate the style because not too many people are doing it. If you look on the internet, you see a lot of generic styles and all that. But if I read an interview on, online or something about an artist, I'll reach out directly to that artist and let them know how I felt about that interview. But in recent conversations, I spoke with an artist that does organic type lettering, and I wish I had an example for you to really show you. But um, so his detail was so amazing and so intricate that I was like blown away. And he had reached out. He said he's open to doing commission artwork, if I wanted to, because I have such an appreciation for it. And he says, not too many people really appreciate the original styles that people had. I mean, people can mimic it, but for people that have been practicing it for a long, long time and are working to develop it, it's really something that's not easy, unless you keep working at it. And he felt very appreciative that I had felt appreciation towards his style, so to say. Other conversations will just be off into left field about like, maybe like conspiracy theories or, like random stuff, different events that go on. A lot of the conversations I have, like especially with COVID now, makes it kind of hard. Before you'd be able to go to a wall and just talk to an artist that you haven't seen, but we talk about everything from family to life to current events. And if I'm meeting the person for the first time, um, I just talk with them about their art and their process and try to build rapport with them that way. And,
Hmm.
try to make a connection. So if in the future any opportunity opens up to shoot them, I would welcome that.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I'm wondering, across the country of the United States. So we know this is kind of a very like strong urban feel. Like if you go in any of the big metropolitan cities, you're probably going to find graffiti art. But what's your knowledge about like maybe going into also like the West Coast? Is it just as prominent? And what about like maybe southern states and like maybe rural areas? Is it just as prominent, or less, or what's the scoop with that?
Well, I mean, the West Coast is so different. I mean, I don't know too much about it, but I would say in the few knowledge that I have, I mean, graffiti is prominent. I mean, you see murals everywhere. When Kobe Bryant died, and his daughter died, they did a big mural right on the boulevard. Nipsey Hussle, one of the hip hop artists, he passed away. They always do tribute murals, and that's something you'll see even in New York when Biggie Smalls passed away. They did murals for him. So you'll see a lot of tribute art. You'll see commercial art, street art, more in the bigger areas. Um, and a lot of the artists that end up doing that stuff are mostly international artists that the city will bring in or art collective will bring in and pay them commission to do a mural or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, when even surprisingly, in some of the rural areas, you'll still see graffiti. I think it's more like graffiti done on trains or freights because the freights travel throughout the United States. So I could do a train per se, let's say in Jersey City, and next thing you know, a few months or weeks later, that train is found in Iowa or Montana or wherever. So that's the great thing about the internet is even though they're in Montana or they're in the middle of Tulsa or somewhere, Tornado Valley, you can still see graffiti. But it is more prominent in the larger metropolitan urban environments and the bigger cities. And the thing with that too is there's so much competition, there's so much more art, so people are trying to put their name up every possible place that you can think of. Whereas in the rural areas, it's probably like pickpocketed about how many artists there really is. But if you take like New York, for example, I mean, it's just incredible, you know. And even Newark, New Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with Newark, but um, areas like Newark, Elizabeth, Camden, and here in New Jersey, they're so prominent with artists. And artists will do certain artists, like mostly street artists, like people that. So, like what I'm showing you is mostly pieces. It's called pieces or burners, so to say.
Mhm.
Um, for street artists, they do something called bombing, which is usually like I guess you can say like circular formed or bubbled form lettering and tags. So for street artists like that, you'll see them on top of buildings. They'll do billboards, um, anything that you can think of that they'll do. Outside of like probably a church or like a sacred place. Because most graffiti artists won't tag something like that, like somebody's house or a sacred place.
Yeah. You kind of touched upon the with the advent of COVID. So in your area, North New Jersey, Nicholas, so it's still being, there's still graffiti artists, but the difference is in actually having those close conversations and being in close proximity. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, events were canceled and stuff like that, and due to restrictions, people really couldn't like do big events. But actually, I mean, it worked out for the graffiti community because with the restrictions, police didn't really want to, chase after anybody. So it opened up the world for people to really get out and you know do both legal and illegal activities. I mean, I don't condone any illegal activity of any sort, of course, but every artist does different stuff, and I mean, at the end of the day, if you're gonna take a risk, just
Mhm.
go 100%, don't go 99.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. All right, let's go ahead and look at the last image.
sure,
Give me just a second and let me get that up.
sure.
Okay.
All right, so this one too is in Newark. So it used to actually be I believe it used to be an old auto factory or something like that. Place was called Shorty's, and it's been abandoned for a very, very long time. But I didn't find out about it till several years later on, and it's pretty much a safe haven for graffiti artists and skaters. The skater community had put their own money pretty much into building ramps and all that other jazz and bowls and stuff like that. So um, anybody and everybody you can think of had gone there to really visit it, become like a pinnacle to the community that people had a safe place to go paint without worrying about getting in trouble or risking their lives or anything like that. And anybody and everybody came here. So I took this picture, and I guess the background behind this, some dude was just sitting there smoking and sipping on something, and it reminded me of when I go there, because typically when I would go into there, I would take shots of all the photography, and then I find myself sitting down or just sitting down on like a concrete slab or a little bench that was made up over there that somebody put, or a tire or something like that, and just sit there and imagine how this stuff was created. I mean, with the graffiti in the backdrop, it really is a powerful thing for me because a lot of people went there as a solace to escape, their life and just chill out, so to say. In our busy lives, we're so stressed out. We don't really get time for self care. And, we don't really think about it. But for a lot of these artists, they're creating a message, they're creating a piece to add to their portfolio or add to their resume. And they just strictly do it for the love for the culture. Um, Whenever I do my paintings, typically I'll write like for the culture or something like that because um, it's a great culture, honestly. I mean, there's good and bad in everything, but um, this you get to see everything. I mean, you get to see like the urban part of it because it's in the Ironbound district, of Newark, which is primarily an immigrant community made up of Brazilian and Portuguese immigrants. So um, this particular area just showed for me what Newark represents. You know, represents art, represents the people, and you know, for me, this was an inspiring photograph.
Hmm. Yeah, I can feel your powerful feelings towards it, and you know how it impacts you. And the way you were describing this, Nicholas, it almost sounds like it's almost like an altar space, like you know, like the way you would walk up to a you know something sacred. You know, it's almost like you kind of have the same reverence.
Yeah, I do. For me, it's hard for me to put certain things into words, you know. But for me, um, watching the artists and watching them execute all their pieces. I mean, if I was to show you like a shot of all the pieces that were in there, every single one would be different. No one would be the same, you
Hmm.
know. And even graffiti artists that are in the same crews, you would see similarities in style, but you wouldn't see the same thing, you know.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
like this, the character that's behind there, they're mostly prominent. Their art is in Jersey City for the most part, because that's where the crew operates for the most part. They do a lot of murals for Jersey City, and they do the graffiti pieces as well. I mean, they've been operating for a long, long time. Um, so getting to see them do their process and do the art, you know, um,
Hmm.
for me is something powerful, you know, because every time I would go to this place, sometimes you'd see people like playing soccer, volleyball, and then you see artists painting or, you know, people smoking and drinking or, you know, so it was just a safe place that people wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Let's say I was doing that at the park, you know, like cops would bother you about it or somebody would bother you about it. But here you could go here and nobody said anything about it, you know.
Hmm.
When they knock these buildings down, then, you know, you start having to find new places, you know.
Hmm.
So, but that I think that's the joy of life is knowing like when I go and even though most of these images are from Newark, I enjoy going to abandoned buildings and abandoned sites because for me it's an escape. Kind of get to like dissociate in a healthy way and experience things that I wouldn't experience in normal life, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say about this image?
Um, no, not really too much, you know, to be
Okay.
honest.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share.
Cool.
And we have a few more minutes, Nicholas, and I'd love for you to just share with us anything that you haven't touched upon that relates to this whole graffiti world. Because as I mentioned, you really, brought us to, almost like the heart and soul of them, as well as, the creative process, as well as, the final product, and kind of like what this whole world is about. Share with us a few other things before we need to wrap up, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, behind me, I have some images. I don't know if it's okay to share.
Sure.
I actually took some photos that I've taken over the, I guess, years. So I don't know if you can see that very well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's an artist at a wall. Similar. It's actually the same wall from where that sketch was
Yes.
of the piece. So it's the same thing. This is a painting I did for my aunt before she passed away. She had dementia, and it's a rose. The reason I did a rose and it's symbolic is because at her house, before she had to go into a nursing home, she always had roses wrapped around this, I guess, iron gate or something like that. And
Mhm.
every year, even in the winter, sometimes there would be roses. So I felt that this was symbolic to her. So I painted it for her while she was in the nursing home shortly before she passed away.
Right. That's sort of like your tribute, like how the graffiti artists were tributing an artist that passed away. That was your tribute, but a family member.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy painting. It's I don't get to do it as often as like because I have a young child, so self-care is far and few. But you know, like after work, I'll be able to sometimes go to that spot where I can and just have my scrap cans and paint whatever comes to mind. I don't really go with a specific sketch because for me, I'm similar to the sky. I don't like the same thing twice. In the sky, you may see a similar pattern, but you never see the same pattern.
Mhm.
Um, and you know, I guess just to update everybody, for me wise, I've kind of put myself out there this year. Probably should have done it earlier, but I don't like to focus on the past and only on the present. So what I did is I submitted some artwork for a show in Rockland County. It's gonna be their first ever virtual show. So my one of my art pieces that I did for a tribute wall last year for COVID, Frontline Heroes, is going to be featured in that show. So what I'll be doing is I'll put on my Instagram page, um, so people can go check it out and click the link and go visit the show. I'll be with about 175 different visual artists on display their art.
That's fantastic, Nicholas. Congratulations with that.
Yeah, thank you. I really want to put myself out there because art truly embodies me.
Mhm.
Not just poetry, but really art, because I want to inspire people and I want to invoke thought in people, because even with COVID, I think it's important for us to have conversations that not necessarily that are uncomfortable per se, but conversations with all the events that have culminated over the years, especially in recent years. I think it's important for us to, as a community, to sit and have conversations,
Mm.
um, and maybe think about things that we didn't think about before.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. Nicholas, we're going to need to wrap up the show for today. We'd like to offer you some closing comments, and if you could let us know how to stay connected with you.
Sure. So I'm pretty much all over the place. I have a blog on WordPress. I guess I can send you the blog information, but it's called N10, so the letter N and the number 10 fitness blog. So I have it on WordPress, and I have a podcast connected to the blog through Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, and some other platforms. I also have a YouTube channel that's primarily fitness and health focused. If you just YouTube search the letter N as in Nancy, the number 10 and the letters fit, so N10 Fit, you can find me there. And then I'm on Instagram. I have two different accounts. My fitness and health one is at the.mtv, the letter 8 and the letter R. And then my graffiti page or photography page is kind of long. So if you want to follow along, it's the @ sign and the words always dot strive dot to dot elevate dot life. So it's always strive to elevate life, which is
Mm,
what my artist alter ego stands for. So
yeah, yeah, I love your positive message, and I love how you've documented the graffiti artists so that those of us that aren't exposed to it can learn from it. But not only are you documenting it through your photography, but you also have, as we mentioned before, and in what you stated, you've had all these interactions for many, many years. So you really have the kind of insider scoop on that whole kind of fascinating world and what the artists are like and the community and everything.
yeah, I know I don't have much time, but just to leave it with this too, if anybody has any questions, they want to reach out to me, they most certainly can. Like I said, I don't give out locations outside of what I give out here. So if everybody can please respect that. Just because don't want to blow up spots and anything like that. And outside of that, just shoot your shot and make yourself feel like home.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And tying that in with your poem, which I really enjoyed, that you shared at the beginning of the show. So, wow, Nicholas, this has been great. You have really brought a lot of integrity and a beautiful light to the whole world of graffiti art and artists. So I thank you so much for coming on Art and Talk and sharing all this and being our guest artist. And we wish you much success with all your creative endeavors and all the different areas that you're attracted to and that you create art in.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for letting me be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be interested to see how things develop for you. So stay in touch with us and let us know.
Most definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching Art and Talk today. We appreciate the time that you take to watch our artist interviews and draw inspiration from it. And do stay connected with us on social media, on our YouTube channel, and also on Facebook Art and Talk as well. And we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.